stared in disbelief as flames engulfed my wedding gown. The ivory satin that had taken 6 months to perfect was now a blackening, melting ruin. Margaret Wilson, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, stood before me in the bridal suite of Cleveland's Grand Pavilion, a lighter still clutched in her manicured hand, her face contorted in triumphant rage. "Now you can't marry my son," she declared, her voice high with hysteria. "Jason needs someone from our social circle, not some nobody from the wrong side of town." She tossed her designer purse over her shoulder, looking immensely pleased with herself. "My name is Valerie Mitchell, and at 25, I never expected to be watching my wedding dress burn 30 minutes before walking down the aisle." My 3 bridesmaids stood frozen in shock, their lavender dresses a stark contrast to the smoldering fabric at my feet. "Mrs. Wilson," I said, my voice surprisingly steady as I reached for my phone, "you have no idea what you just did." She laughed, the sound brittle as glass. "What I did?" "I saved my son from the biggest mistake of his life. You think a community college education and a job at a local advertising agency makes you good enough for a Wilson? My Jason belongs with Melissa Hammond. Her father owns half of downtown Cleveland." I pressed a button on my phone, watching Margaret's face as I did. My bridesmaid Jessica moved quickly to open a window, trying to clear the smoke that was now filling the room. "The wedding's off," Margaret continued, waving her hand dismissively. "I'll just tell everyone you got cold feet. Jason will be upset for a while, but he'll understand eventually." "Are you sure about that?" I asked, turning my phone screen toward her. On it was a live view of the ceremony space, the elegant rows of white chairs, the floral arch at the altar, and the massive projection screen that was now displaying a perfect view of this very room, showing Margaret in all her destructive glory. Her face paled. What is that?" "The wedding live stream," I explained calmly. "For Jason's grandparents in Florida and my sister who's deployed overseas. It's been running for the past 20 minutes, capturing everyone arriving, the musicians setting up." I paused, meeting her eyes. "And you destroying my wedding dress while announcing your true feelings about me." "Turn it off." Margaret lunged for my phone, her perfect coiffure coming undone. "You planned this. You set me up." Jessica stepped between us. "Mrs. Wilson, everyone just watched you commit arson on live video. I think you should take a moment to consider your next move." The phone in my hand buzzed with incoming messages. My bridesmaid Tina glanced at the screen and gasped. "It's Jason. He's coming to the bridal suite." Margaret's eyes widened in panic. She looked frantically around the room as if searching for an escape route. "This isn't what it looks like. I was just testing the fabric. Wedding dresses are supposed to be flame retardant." From my phone, we could hear murmuring from the gathered guests. The camera angle had shifted. Someone had taken control of the live stream, and now showed the wedding party's reaction. Jason's father sat stone-faced in the front row. Jason's best man was already rushing toward the building. Most telling was Jason himself, no longer waiting patiently at the altar, but sprinting up the center aisle, his face a mask of shock and fury. "Valerie," my bridesmaid Melody whispered, "what are we going to do about the ceremony? Should we tell everyone to go home?" I looked down at the smoldering remains of my dream dress, now just blackened scraps on the antique hardwood floor. The practical part of my mind, the part that had put myself through college while working 2 jobs, was already calculating next steps. "No," I said firmly. "The ceremony is happening, just differently." The door burst open. Jason stood there, still in his tuxedo, his eyes moving from my face to his mother to the ruined dress on the floor. Behind him, the venue manager and his father appeared, both looking horrified. "Mom," Jason said, his voice dangerously quiet, "tell me I didn't just watch you burn Valerie's wedding dress while saying she isn't good enough for our family?" Margaret's demeanor changed instantly. "Sweetheart, you don't understand. I was protecting you. This girl has been after your money from day one. I was testing her character and—" "Stop." Jason cut her off. "Stop lying. I heard everything." He turned to me, his eyes softening. "Val, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she would do something like this. I stepped carefully around the burnt fabric, moving toward him. It's just a dress, I said, though we both knew it was much more than that. But your mother just showed exactly what she thinks of me, of us, in front of everyone we know. Jason took my hands in his, seemingly oblivious to his mother's sputtering protests. What do you want to do, Val? It's your call. Before I could answer, Mr. Wilson appeared behind Jason, his expression grim. Margaret, what have you done? His voice was low, controlled, but with an edge I'd never heard before. Richard, please, Margaret pleaded. You know the Hammonds would be a much better match. Their family has been part of Cleveland society for generations. As opposed to Valerie, who built a successful career through hard work and determination. Mr. Wilson shook his head in disgust. You've gone too far this time. My phone continued to buzz with notifications. I glanced down to see messages pouring in from guests who were watching everything unfold on the live stream. The venue coordinator hovered in the doorway, looking uncertain. Ms. Mitchell, she said hesitantly. The guests are asking what's happening. Should we make an announcement? I looked at the ruins of my dress again, then at my bridesmaids in their lavender gowns. A plan was forming in my mind, one that would turn Margaret's attempt to sabotage our wedding into something entirely different. Tell them there's been a change of plans, I said, but the ceremony will proceed in 20 minutes. Margaret scoffed. In what? Your underwear? You can't possibly. In my backup dress, I interrupted calmly. The room fell silent. Jason looked at me in confusion. You have a backup dress? I hadn't, of course, but 6 months of working with temperamental clients at the advertising agency had taught me to always have a contingency plan. Melody, I turned to my bridesmaid. Remember that photo shoot we did for Cleveland Bride last month? Call Eliza and ask if her sample dress is still available. Melody's eyes widened in understanding. The ivory sheath with the lace overlay? It should fit you perfectly. Jason's father stepped forward, pulling out his phone. I'll have my driver pick it up immediately. Where is it located? As they coordinated the dress retrieval, I turned back to Margaret, who stood watching in disbelief as her plan unraveled. You really thought a dress would stop this wedding? After everything Jason and I have been through? But everyone's watching, she hissed, gesturing at my phone. They all saw what happened. Yes, I agreed. They did. And now they'll also see what happens next. I turned to address the camera directly, knowing the guests were still watching. To everyone waiting, thank you for your patience. The ceremony will be slightly delayed, but love always finds a way, even when someone tries to burn it down. A cheer erupted from the phone's speakers, the guests in the ceremony space showing their support. Jason squeezed my hand, pride evident in his eyes. Mom, Jason said firmly, you need to leave. Dad will take you home. You are no longer welcome at our wedding. Margaret's face contorted with rage. You would choose her over your own mother? After everything I've done for you? After what you've done today? Jason countered. Absolutely. The next 20 minutes passed in a whirlwind of activity. While Margaret was escorted out by security, after Mr. Wilson apologetically insisted on it, Eliza from Cleveland Bride arrived with not one but 3 sample dresses. The bridal suite transformed into an impromptu fashion headquarters, with my bridesmaids, the venue coordinator, and even some of the female guests who'd volunteered to help. This one, Jessica declared, holding up an elegant ivory sheath dress with delicate lace detailing. It's perfect for your figure, and we can have it ready in minutes. The venue's seamstress, who had originally been hired just for last-minute adjustments, worked miracle after miracle with safety pins and quick stitches. Meanwhile, Jason had returned to the ceremony space to address the guests in person. Through the live stream, which someone had thoughtfully positioned toward the altar, I could hear him speaking. Today didn't start the way any of us expected, he was saying, his voice steady despite everything. but Valerie and I have always believed that it's not the perfect circumstances that make a marriage work. It's how you handle the imperfect ones together." A round of applause followed his words. I smiled as Melody adjusted the borrowed veil on my head. "There," she said, stepping back to admire her work. "You look absolutely stunning." The dress wasn't what I'd planned to wear when I became Mrs. Jason Wilson, but as I looked in the mirror, I realized it suited me perfectly. Simpler, more elegant, and somehow stronger than my original choice. Like me, adapting to circumstances rather than being defeated by them. Mr. Wilson knocked gently on the door before entering. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Valerie, you look beautiful." He paused, his expression pained. "I want to apologize for Margaret. Her behavior was inexcusable." "You don't need to apologize for her, Mr. Wilson," I replied. "You didn't burn my dress." He nodded gratefully. "Jason sent me to tell you that everyone's ready whenever you are. And," he added with a small smile, "your boss from the agency is here. Apparently he's documenting everything for what he calls the greatest viral wedding marketing campaign Cleveland has ever seen." I laughed. Trust Eddie to see a promotional opportunity in disaster. The advertising world had taught me that sometimes the most compelling stories come from overcoming unexpected challenges. The venue coordinator appeared at the door. "We're ready when you are, Ms. Mitchell. The musicians are prepared, and we've adjusted the lighting to complement your new dress." "Wait," I said, an idea forming. "The live stream is still running, right?" When she confirmed it was, I made a quick decision. "Can we project it in the ceremony space for a few more minutes? I'd like everyone to see us walking from here to there, the whole journey, not just the arrival." 10 minutes later, as my bridesmaids and I made our way through the venue's garden path toward the ceremony space, I knew every step was being broadcast to the waiting guests. Not as a traditional bridal entrance, but as something more powerful. A statement that nothing, not even a vindictive mother-in-law with a lighter, could stop this wedding. As we approached the doors to the ceremony space, I could hear the guests' applause growing louder. Jason waited just inside, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Ready to get married?" he asked, taking my hand. "More ready than ever," I replied, squeezing his fingers. The ceremony that followed wasn't the one we had rehearsed, but it felt more authentic than anything we could have planned. As I walked down the aisle in my borrowed dress, guests rose to their feet, applauding rather than maintaining the traditional reverent silence. Their faces showed not just the usual wedding joy, but something deeper: respect, admiration, solidarity. Jason's father stood proudly in the front row, occasionally glancing at the empty seat where Margaret should have been. His eyes met mine briefly, conveying wordless support. Our officiant, Pastor Mitchell, no relation though we'd joked about it, improvised beautifully. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered here today to witness not just a wedding but a triumph of love over adversity. Valerie and Jason have already faced their first challenge as a couple, and they've met it with grace, resilience, and unwavering commitment to each other." During our vows, Jason added lines that hadn't been in our rehearsal. "I promise to stand by you against anyone who tries to come between us," he said, his voice carrying to the back of the room and beyond to those watching the live stream. "Even if, especially if, that person is from my own family." When it came time for the exchange of rings, a moment of panic crossed Jason's face. The rings had been with his mother during the pre-ceremony preparations. Mr. Wilson quickly stepped forward, producing the velvet box from his pocket. "I took the liberty of retrieving these earlier," he explained quietly. "Just in case." After we were pronounced husband and wife, the celebration that erupted seemed to release all the tension that had built up throughout the afternoon. As we walked back down the aisle, I noticed Eddie, my boss, filming discreetly from the side. He gave me a thumbs up that somehow managed to be both professional and genuinely emotional. The reception that followed in the Grand Pavilion's ballroom had an atmosphere unlike any wedding I'd attended before. Instead of polite conversation and standard wedding rituals, there was an almost festive defiance in the air. Someone had hastily created a custom Snapchat filter, featuring a phoenix rising from ashes with our names underneath. "Your wedding is trending locally on social media," Jessica informed me as we entered the reception. "People are using Nar rising from the ashes and Can't Burn Love." Jason's college roommate Tom, who worked in public relations, approached us with his phone. "The Cleveland Plain Dealer wants a statement. Their lifestyle editor saw the live stream. Apparently her niece was a guest. And they're calling it Cleveland's most resilient wedding." "Tell them we're just grateful for everyone's support," Jason replied, his arm secure around my waist. "And that true commitment means facing obstacles together, not running from them." As the evening progressed, I noticed Mr. Wilson speaking intensely with various family members, damage control evident in his gestures and expressions. Jason's Aunt Diane approached our table during dinner, leaning down to speak privately. "Richard is beside himself," she confided. "Margaret's been escorted home, but she's threatening to cut Jason out of the family business if he doesn't come to his senses. Richard told her that after today, she's the one who needs to worry about her position in the company." Jason squeezed my hand under the table. "Dad's always been the backbone of the family," he said. "Mom just never realized it because he let her think she was in charge." As our first dance began, I couldn't help but notice the empty tables near the front of the room, spaces reserved for Margaret's country club friends, who had quietly disappeared after the incident. In their place, colleagues from my advertising agency had moved forward, filling the void with genuine support. "Mr. Wilson is handling damage control like a pro," Eddie commented, approaching us after the dance with 2 glasses of champagne. "He's personally thanking everyone for staying while subtly letting Margaret's allies know they won't be missed." Jason nodded, watching his father work the room with newfound respect. "I think this is the first time I've seen him stand up to her so publicly," he murmured. 27 years of marriage, and today was his breaking point. The wedding photographer, initially hired by Margaret, approached us cautiously. "Mrs. Wilson, the younger Mrs. Wilson," she clarified with a smile. "I've captured some beautiful moments today, but I wanted to ask about the dress incident. Some of the guests took photos. Would you prefer I request they keep those private?" I exchanged glances with Jason before answering. "Actually, I think honesty is the best approach here. This is part of our story now." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a notification. The short clip of Margaret setting fire to my dress had already been viewed over 20,000 times on a local Cleveland news page. The comments section overflowed with support, interspersed with stories from other brides who had faced difficult in-laws. "You might not have planned it," Eddie said, scrolling through the comments, "but you've started a movement. Standing strong in the face of toxic family relationships is resonating with people." Jason's cousin Mia appeared at our table, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and determination. "I want you both to know that not everyone in the family shares Aunt Margaret's views," she said firmly. "Most of us think she crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." "Thank you, Mia," I replied, genuinely touched. "That means a lot." As the evening progressed, Jason received a text from his father. He read it silently before showing me the screen. "Your mother has locked herself in the guest house. She's demanding I choose between her and that girl. I've informed her that her behavior today has made my choice remarkably easy. We'll discuss next steps when you return from your honeymoon. Proud of you both. Dad." "Are you okay?" I asked Jason quietly, searching his face for signs of regret or doubt. "I'm better than okay," he replied, squeezing my hand. "For years, I watched Mom undermine Dad, belittle you, and manipulate everyone around her. Today, she finally showed her true colors to everyone, not just us. It's like a weight has been lifted." As the reception continued, I noticed something remarkable happening. Guests who had been stiff and formal at the beginning, Margaret's side of the family and social circle, were now relaxing, engaging more genuinely with my friends and family. Without Margaret's watchful eye, The artificial social barriers she'd maintained were dissolving. "Mrs. Wilson?" The venue coordinator approached with an unexpected smile. "There's something you should see." She led us to the entrance of the ballroom. There, prominently displayed on an easel, was a large photo frame filled with dozens of handwritten notes from guests. The heading above them read, "Messages of love and resilience for Valerie and Jason." "Your bridesmaids organized this," she explained. "They asked guests to write messages of support after what happened. 1 week into our honeymoon in the Maldives, the full impact of what had happened at our wedding was still unfolding. Jason and I sat on our private deck overlooking crystal blue waters, scrolling through messages on our phones during our daily check-in with reality. "Dad says Mom's staying with her sister in Cincinnati," Jason said, setting his phone down. "Apparently, Aunt Linda is the only person who still believes her version of events, that she was testing the dress fabric and everyone misunderstood." I smiled wryly, adjusting my sun hat. Hard to misunderstand someone shouting, "Now you can't marry my son," while holding a lighter. The Cleveland media had picked up our story in earnest. What began as a sensational local wedding disaster had evolved into a conversation about toxic family dynamics and standing up for healthy relationships. Several women's magazines had reached out requesting interviews about maintaining boundaries with difficult in-laws. Eddie says the agency has received 3 new client inquiries specifically asking for the team with the wedding dress phoenix. I laughed, showing Jason the message. He wants to know if we'd consider being part of a panel discussion on crisis management when we get back. Jason took my hand, his thumb brushing over my new wedding band. "Only if you want to. We can keep this private if you prefer." I thought about the messages we'd received from other couples facing similar challenges with disapproving families. Maybe our experience can help others, not the way I planned to start our marriage, but authentic, Jason finished, like us. 3 months after our wedding, Jason and I attended the Wilson Family Foundation's annual gala, our first major public appearance since returning from our honeymoon. The event, typically orchestrated by Margaret, had been completely reimagined under Mr. Wilson's direction. "Nervous?" Jason asked as our car pulled up to the Cleveland Art Museum. "A little," I admitted, smoothing my gown, a stunning emerald design from Eliza's boutique, who had turned our wedding story into a successful marketing campaign about resilience and second chances. Inside, the atmosphere was noticeably different from previous years. The stiff formality had been replaced with genuine warmth. Mr. Wilson greeted us at the entrance, looking years younger without Margaret's controlling presence. "There they are," he beamed, embracing us both. "The couple who inspired our foundation's new initiative." He guided us toward a display showcasing the Wilson Family Foundation's newest program, Rising Phoenix Grants, for women starting over after difficult life transitions. The foundation logo had been redesigned to incorporate a subtle phoenix motif. "We've already approved funding for 15 women," Mr. Wilson explained proudly, each one rebuilding after challenging circumstances. As we mingled with guests, I noticed Margaret's absence had affected the guest list. Gone were many of the society climbers and status-conscious acquaintances, replaced by people genuinely passionate about the foundation's work. "Mrs. Wilson," a young woman approached, introducing herself as one of the grant recipients. "Your wedding story gave me courage to leave my toxic marriage. Now I'm starting my own business." Later that evening, as Jason and I shared a quiet moment on the museum's terrace, he received a text message. "Mom's coming back to Cleveland," he said, his expression thoughtful. "Dad says she's agreed to counseling if she wants any chance of reconciliation." I squeezed his hand supportively. "Whatever happens with your parents, we'll face it together." "Just like we did with the wedding," he smiled, pulling me close. "Some flames are meant to destroy. Others just reveal what's unbreakable.